Today, I've got Patrick Crane, the head of growth for OpenSolar, and we're going to talk about how do we actually get down to this fabled $2 a watt, which ironically is more than double what some other markets around the world are able to offer solar at the utility scale, and certainly even in Australia, in certain cases, at the residential level. What's holding our industry back? What are the fundamental inherent blockers for the United States market that keep us at something like, I think the average quoted project on OpenSolar still hovers above $5 a watt. How do we get down to less than half that? Is it possible? We're going to explore that and more with Patrick today. And again, if you love what you hear, you should dig into the more than 850 episodes in our back catalog and let us know what you think. I'd love your feedback. But for now, let's get ready to tune in and tune up your skills on today's Tactical Tuesday here on SunCast. Well, Patrick Crane, it's so good to see you, man. It's been a long time coming, and I'm glad to finally have you here as a guest on this show.
Yeah, it's super cool to be here. Thanks for making some time.
The industry has learned a lot over the last 2 decades that you and I have been working in and around building the narrative, the tools, and the education systems that help deploy this at a more accelerated pace. I'd say very few entrepreneurs have done as much as you and Birchie in the way of innovation, of really trying to bring this industry online. For those who are unfamiliar, you were one of the early team members. I don't remember if you were a co-founder of Sungevity. Is that accurate?
They used to call me the fourth co-founder, I believe. But yeah, I'll just say very, very early team member.
I heard someone mention in another podcast that it's referred to as like a late joiner founder, like a late joining founder. But it's someone who has so much impact, despite the fact that they weren't there from the very earliest conversation, that they clearly took the company to a different trajectory. And one of the reasons why you have that distinction is because you were that person who came into the Sungevity team with quite a lot of knowledge around how to take this nascent solar industry to Main Street using these burgeoning social tools and how to think from a marketing perspective. Something I heard you say that I think resonates with a lot of us, but isn't an obvious connection, is that solar is social. So I want to start there. You famously came from LinkedIn as a LinkedIn executive, social media maven, to work at a solar company in an industry at a time where there was like almost no real, like very clear upside, the way tech was having its moment. Talk to me about what you saw in the solar industry that compelled you to leave tech and move over to solar, and why you describe solar as a social product.
Yeah, well, I left LinkedIn right around 2011, so right around the IPO. I'd been fascinated by the solar industry. I'd watched panels going up on roofs and was just intrigued. And as a lover of the outdoors, that kind of it was an easy jump when the recruiter said, "I've got these 4 things for you," and I said, "What's this? What's that Sungevity one?" But the truth is that I had this hunch that solar could be a social phenomenon. And, since there's been lots of studies published that as soon as, 2 homes go solar in a street, then solar accelerates in that street just because of the visual reminder every day. So I always found that very interesting. With LinkedIn, it was very much kind of a growth playbook about getting people to refer people. And I figured we could use the same thing in the solar industry, specifically Sungevity. So, cutting a pretty long story short, what Sungevity was obsessed about was NPS, Net Promoter Score. And it was obsessed about how it did at every step of the journey, but ultimately, how happy was that customer? And what we learned was we knew exactly when to ask for a referral, friends, neighbors, family members, because we knew when the customer was the happiest. And then we knew that if we gave them a bunch of LinkedIn-style tools to input their address book, share on socials with unique links, that we could actually build a systematic way to ask for referrals and then give the customer the tool to tell their friends. And then we had a nice incentive to do so. What it meant was that at Sungevity's peak, doing, at the time it was a lot, 1,200 systems a month selling, over 1/3 of those systems sold were from referrals. So we, just being transparent, we got from about a $4,000 CAC down to under $2,000 CAC because it was faster to grow that way and a lot cheaper to grow that way than buying ads. So yeah, that's how we did it.
Do you know what the average solar industry CAC is right now in the residential US?
Isn't it still up in the sort of $2,000-$3,000 range? I think it can vary, obviously, depending on how you're doing it. But if you're doing it the traditional way of buying advertising, yeah, it can still be up in that range.
Like some studies show that it can get as high as 10,000, which would explain, why some of these solar array product quotes can be so high, but or residential quotes can be so high. I read an article that the Bodie team wrote that like retail averages about $10 per customer, right? And it's obviously not one for one. We're selling an appliance. Software is like around $400 CAC. Solar is often 3,000 or more.
Right.
Still today, in a world where more than 10 years ago, you guys cracked the nut on getting below 3,000.
Yeah, I think we still have to do that as an industry in the US. We have to sort of. That's one example of how we can more systematically start attacking that cost stack, so to speak.
Yeah.
And especially around CAC, it's one of the ways we can do it. And obviously, got some other thoughts for you today.
And if you think about the average solar project, we'll just stick with like the averages that people kind of generally talk about. Let's just benchmark like 30,000. 3,000 is 10%. So if we can reduce it by 1,000, that still is not such a meaningful contribution to the reduction that we get it down to the $2. So as we walk through today, this conversation, one of the things I want to try to figure out is like, actually, what do the dollars and cents look like? I see, Ravi Mickelson of Atmos, like often is in there jousting with folks around what does it really look like. There are folks that will jump in and say, but you don't understand. You don't run an EPC company, as though he hasn't seen hundreds of thousands of quotes at this point. But I'd love to hear from you, like, what are the biggest levers that you see across the platform, even globally, that allow the market price to dramatically reduce? And let's start with referrals. One of the things I'm curious about is why do you think solar pros don't use referrals as a tool, despite the fact that it's a common knowledge that more than 50% of new business or growth can and should come from customer referrals?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, many solar businesses are pretty small, right? And they're often they have small teams. They don't necessarily have a dedicated marketing function or someone to run the website, and it can be a little transactional, right? You focus on doing a fantastic job. You get that Google business review. You try to get that 5-star rating, and then maybe you plug that into your website, and it's kind of onto the next project. And so I think there's an opportunity for us to, there's great tools out there like the Bodhi and the Snowballs of the world. But I think that we as an industry can, again, look at when to ask, when exactly is the time to ask, how do you ask, and then what tools do you give your happy customer to refer. But it's absolutely the case that one of the ways we can get CAC down is by having those often completely free leads coming in from customers. So if you think about conventional lead gen, right? You what are you buying a lead for? If you go from a lead generating company, $150, $100, something like that.
Yeah. On the low side, it's like 75. Yeah.
Yeah. And you don't know the quality of those leads. It's a kind of a crapshoot. Whereas a high quality lead from a happy customer who just gave you a Google 5-star review, that's a very high quality lead. It's the chances are you're going to get that deal. You'd have to do something pretty bad. But again, if we can as an industry build that knowledge of how and when to ask, and then to have those tools, that's a big opportunity. That's one big lever.
Was there anything that you found works well in terms of the tools to incentivize your existing customers to refer their friends and neighbors?
Yeah, I mean, in the old days, in the Sungevity days, believe it or not, it was the LinkedIn trick of import your address book and then just pick the friends and family in your address book that you want to refer to, and it would just ping out a link. I think address books are less of a thing these days, and socials are much more. But by just sharing maybe how much you're saving now that you've gone solar, sharing some content from the installer that you used, it pings out a unique link that's specific to you. So when you share it and your friends click on it, that link goes back straight into the installer's kind of sales funnel. So that would be, I mean, social's so much more prolific now than it was back in 2011. So yeah.
Is it still hard for folks to figure out like how to, I mean, we refer to it in marketing as affiliate links. Essentially, you're giving your homeowner an affiliate link so that they can in some way get credit. Are homeowners motivated by having that level of like that incentive? What can an installer give to a homeowner to incentivize them to import their address book or share their neighbors? Is there some like long-term service benefit? Or, I think that's the question that some folks have in their mind of like actually figuring out what's that quid pro quo trade you can have and how do I actually track it?
In the Sungevity days, what we started with was really interesting. We started with $1,000 reward.
Money.
Yeah. So Nico, you take your friend solar, your friend actually goes solar and you got $1,000. But here's the interesting thing that we found. We thought it was all money related. There was one firefighter in Livermore, California, called Corey, who made $130,000 doing that.
Wow.
Yeah, because he just got all the people he knew to go solar with Sungevity. And he was obviously an extreme example. But what we learned was that we realized that money wasn't the primary motivator. What was the primary motivator was community. One happy customer wanting their friends and family to enjoy that same improvement in prosperity. And so when we halved the bonus, halved the reward from 1,000 to just 500, we saw no drop off at all in referral activity. So
wow.
what I would tell installers is, offer a financial incentive, but it doesn't need to be huge. Because what's more interesting for that happy customer is they want other people to have those same kind of savings. So that was an interesting thing that I was not expecting. I just thought it'd be all about the dollars.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
No drop off whatsoever. I didn't expect to hear that.
Nope. No drop off whatsoever. Half the incentive.
It's fascinating to me that you can slice it by half and still have no drop off in the referral activity. And in particular, that Corey and others like them are principally motivated by building, by that sense of community, and people like us do things like this. The question I have if I am sitting in the installer's shoes is, okay, great. Then how much does that help reduce the overall CAC? Like that's one lever. What am I otherwise paying as a percentage of my costs that this helps me avoid, right? Like, do you have, and maybe you don't have those numbers, and I would just encourage folks to think through this as a specific part of the business. And again, we're in no means intending to be demeaning or insinuating that you all are not thinking through this. I'm thinking through it because I don't own an installation company anymore, and I'm thinking about how would this work in the modern economic tables of how you're building your balance sheet or your spreadsheet. Patrick, do you know that number? Like how much does the acquisition cost contribute to the overall like that ability to reduce the number from, let's call it $5 a watt to $2 a watt?
Yeah, so we've done some maths on this, and it's one of the big reasons that we did the OpenSolar 3.0 launch last week is that AI is now starting to play a factor. Right. So we think headline stat is that AI and related tools, which we can talk about, can bring CAC down, bring overall cost down, should I say, by about 40-ish cents per watt.
40 cents a watt. Yep.
Yeah. Right around 40, 42, 43 is what we modeled. But what goes into that thinking is that, in the old days of solar, what would happen? You'd try to get the name out there. Your customers, if they were interested, would come to your website, skulk around a little bit, maybe fill in a form and wait. And, it was a very one-sided exchange, right? Customer gives you everything. And then, you take an hour, a day, a week to get back to that customer. And AI is now changing that. So one of the things we launched last week in OS 3.0 was this thing we call AI lead gen. And the idea is that now a customer hears of you, the installer, right? Goes to the website. They can design a system for themselves.
Right.
So you control what it designs. You control your hardware, your pricing, your setbacks, your rules. But it will produce 3 different alternative estimates for the customer. So that old idea of fill in a form, volunteer your details, wait. No. They get an answer right there, visualize, they see the panels on the roof, they see their home, they see the potential savings. Way more engaging. And we've never been able to do that before. So the AI that we built now will enable you to plug that experience into your website, maybe into your tablet if you got a stall at the mall or in the home improvement store. Maybe you're doing door to door. You can plug it into whatever tablet you have that you're holding. But now it's not a mystery. Now it's okay. There it is on my roof. Oh, and you'd put it there, would you? And I could save. You telling me I could save that much money? So way more interesting, way more engaging. And if we think about the typical kind of solar conversion rate now, in the sort of 10 to 20 range, we think this can get you up into the high 20s, 30s, and we'll be as we roll it out, we'll prove the hypothesis. But I think it will reduce time to sale. It will increase the percentage of leads who come through your website or through various apps to actually want to talk to you, and increase the percentage of the time that they answer the phone, and you can get that full proposal in front of them. So I think that is another way to do it. And then when you get from estimate into full proposal, detailed design, the real dollars and cents and exact equipment and stuff, AI is working there too. So we build it into the design studio. So a combination of speed to response, increased customer reaction rate, more motivation, faster full design and proposal back. We think there's about 40 cents in there per watt in savings.
As we bring the costs down, so if it's $5, if we just say $5, now we're at $4.20. How do we reduce the rest of that gap? I want to see if we can identify what sits in that next $2.20 or I guess that's $2.60 of watt of, I'm going to call it cost stack. There are probably other words we could use, but in the back of my mind, Patrick, I'm thinking okay, if I reverse engineer this and I say the price should be $2 a watt, which is the foregone theory or conclusion that I'm purporting, then what's the reasonable gross profit margin for installers if we're targeting that price, right? And then we can look at what are there real hard costs or are there soft costs in that extra $2.60 stack?
Well, let's touch briefly on kind of the next kind of stack attack kind of approach, right? How do you get that stack down? And I won't repeat everything Birchie said, but he's been on SunCast. He's talked to your audience through this.
Yeah.
But permitting in the States is crippling, right? There are all these complex rules. We're talking sometimes about 4 or 5 trips to the permit office. We're talking about a lot of overheads in your operations team, not only in the actual fees for permitting, but in all the administration and the changes that the local AHJ wants. So that's why Birchie founded SolarAPP. SolarAPP's now this morning, they're in 382 AHJs, so a ways to go, but rolling out. And what SolarAPP does is enables the solar installer to literally shoot their design through an integration through OpenSolar into SolarAPP or whatever design tool they're using, and get an instant permit back. So you're taking $1 a watt out of your costs because you don't have all that additional operational burden, right? Now, Birchie's way more eloquent than me on this. It's why he founded SolarAPP. But that is a big chunk. And of course, as you alluded to when you opened today, you can buy on a Tuesday and sell on a Wednesday in places like Australia because you don't have that complicated, expensive, time-consuming permitting process. So that's a huge chunk of the stack out of the way.
That is built into a lot of folks' sales process, is the invariable burden and overhead required to get things across the finish line. What's also built in because of that is the attrition of customers who just simply won't wait. And they're like, wow, this is taking 3 months. That's ridiculous. I'm going to cancel. So I know I've talked to installers who say, we actually build in part of our margin to account for the attrition of homeowners who are unwilling to wait on the burdensome process.
Yeah. I mean, you are looking at 30% cancellation rates, 20 to 30% cancellation rates.
That's
typically
insane.
What we observe. And think about that. Think about the fact that you've spent, $1,000, $1,500, maybe even more to get them through to a sale.
Yeah.
And then your 30% cancellation rate, you're losing a lot of money.
Yeah.
And you're right, customers don't wait, and why would they, right? Because they don't have the confidence after 2-3 months that this is ever going to happen. So they cancel. So if you think
and
about
then that CAC has to be burdened on all the other customers.
right, somehow that's got to be passed along, and that's driving that cost stack up, and so streamlined permitting, same day permits, zero cost is going to really attack the stack, so to speak.
Yeah.
Now, I will, if I may, Nico, I'll just put a little advertisement out there. SolarAPP is a nonprofit. And your audience, if they want to see if SolarApp's active in their AHJ, they can consult the SolarAPP team. But equally, if they would like to see SolarAPP live in their AHJ in their jurisdiction, again, they can work with the SolarAPP team, who will help them talk to the building officers, talk to the building departments, and try to get it adopted. The really cool thing is that our experience talking to the SolarAPP team is that these building officers, they're not resistant to it. They're not sort of fighting it. They just don't know about it. So it's the solar installer community can, in fact, work with the SolarAPP team, get it adopted, and that can make a big difference.
So, Patrick, we're down now to 360 a watt. I just published an episode recently with Jigger, who said that with batteries, solar can be at 250 a watt. So let's just focus on that for a second. What's the next $1.10 a watt? Is that something that's easily reconcilable?
Yeah, I mean, I've got another like 47 to 50 cents a watt that I want to argue we can achieve. And this is really down to, honestly, I think it's the software industry's fault rather than the solar installer's fault. But what you have in many, many, many solar installers' workflows is a very convoluted process. Multiple different apps, manual transferring of data from different apps, sometimes APIs, wrestling with APIs and trying to transfer data from spreadsheets to design apps and back again. That is expensive. It is error prone. It really sucks up the operations team's time. And again, like that's not the solar installer's fault. That's because we as a solar industry haven't really, to date, given them a better solution. And it's another kind of reason we launched 3.0 last week. Because now, I think that we need to offer one consistent, simple workflow from lead to design to proposal to cash collection to automatic bill of materials generation to project management, shopping for the equipment. There are so many cycles that you can remove for your operations team so that as the business scales, you don't keep adding people, right? What you want is you want to kind of level off the number of people that you've got. And then try to improve those margins just by saving all that time. So, not naming names, but there are solar platforms that are still charging $10, $20 a proposal. So we can take that out of the cost stack. Because if you extrapolate that, if you look at a 20% conversion and at $20 per proposal, that's $100 spent right there for that project. We'll take that out of the mix, but then take all those additional apps that many, many solar pros are paying for. They're paying for a third-party CRM. They're paying for a third-party ERP. They're paying for a third-party document management system. And what we've done is baked all that in to the platform. So that is extra cost that can be taken out. And I'm really passionate about this because there's this feeling, this justified feeling that AI and machine learning will kill jobs. I think for the solar industry, what AI does is it enables you to keep growing your business, but level off your overheads, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's one thing I was going to point out is like, well, while I'm doing the calculation here of like, well, those software costs are a relatively small overall cost stack that gets added into that dollar per watt cost. But what's true is like, as a solar company grows, I was recently talking to someone who said that they were having a conversation with the Freedom Forever CEO whose response to one of their questions was like, I don't know, we've got thousands of employees. And my thought was like, wow, does it really take thousands of employees to run this kind of operation? And if that, like, what is the total number of sales per month, the number of staff required to support, like, let's just call it 1,000 sales per month. And can we level that off? And therein, like that alone makes a huge contribution to the dollar per watt reduction that we can achieve. It is not necessarily in the soft cost of like the software, but the hard cost of the overhead required as a company grows to staff simply managing the complexity of the processes required, including permitting, to have a higher throughput of homes sold.
as you level off those overheads, right, and your margins are improving, you as the pro can obviously choose to pass some of that on to the customer, right, and bring that cost down a little more. So, yeah, certainly, I think that AI frees up these operations teams to focus on some of the higher value activities, right, the customer face time, process engineering, and so on.
There's a couple of things I want to touch on. One is there is one obvious area where I think in certain circumstances there is egregious overreach of cost stack, like getting us into that $5 watt range, and that is the sales commission. Many salespeople feel justified. I don't really care to touch on like the justification of the sales commission. That is an obvious area where we can have a more standardized approach. In many cases, homeowners are unaware of what exactly, as a component of the total sale, the sales commission represents, which is something that seems like anathema for an industry or a country where we require on a home sale, for example, something that's a high ticket item, or even on, for the most part, you can figure out what your car salesman is making because you understand the math on it. But it's completely obfuscated from the homeowner that there are things like dealer fees and things like sales commissions that are set arbitrarily, not by the installer necessarily, but by the person knocking on your door or by the financier who is financing the product. We don't have the time to get into it. I do want to touch on like those two alone are easily 50 cents a watt. Like if we just put those two together, like upwards of $1 a watt. I'm going to argue that like 50 cents to $1 a watt, that extra $1.10 I'm trying to get to could be achieved there. And Patrick, what I heard you say is there's probably another, let's call it 30 to 50 cents that can be addressed in leveling off that overhead. So if we add that math in just for the sake of time that we are kind of getting to the end of it, and I do encourage any listener that wants to have a direct conversation with me or wants to come onto the podcast and lay out the math, I encourage you. I'm open to and welcome to anyone providing the counter narrative that no, we have to be at $4 a watt. No, we have to be at $5 a watt. Prove me wrong that we have to be there by showing me the numbers, and also be willing to include the gross margin you are willing to accept as an installer and the sales commissions and finance fees that we must require in the industry to survive. And if we're open about those things, the way that, by the way, the entire real estate industry is required to be by law, I am completely on board. If you guys could prove that we have to be at $4 a watt, I will put away my argument that we need to be at $2 a watt, and I will stand behind you and say, nope, it's $4 a watt. But show me that the only way we can keep these businesses alive is keeping it at $4 a watt. And I will be your biggest fan, and I will shout it from the rooftops. And because all I want to see is that we deploy more solar. I'm not trying to kill solar installers' business. To that end, you mentioned like AI. I'm glad that you brought up that AI doesn't take away jobs. It allows us to do more with the people we have.
Exactly.
And it allows us to be more efficient, which this industry is not immune to the inefficiencies that any construction trade face as they try to scale. Patrick, I'll pause for a minute to see if you have any comment on the diatribe I just outlaid.
Yeah, I mean, I do have one. You really prompted a memory of a recent conversation with one of our favorite solar pros in the U.S. Operates out of Colorado and California, and his name's David. And David said to me, "Will you please build this widget I can put in my website so my customers can design a system for themselves? Like, I'm begging you, I'll pay for it," and all these things. And I said, "Well, why? Why would you pay for it?" And he said, "Because sales commissions are crippling me. I've got a good reputation, right? I've got a good brand. I've got a good local community presence. I want to create a retail experience on my website. And the first time any of my team members talk to the customer, it's to process the order. So please build that for me." And that is what David said to me. And happy to say we've built that now. But think about this, going back to our conversation earlier about referrals. What if those talented salespeople are now they're doing great order processing, and then the moment the ops team does a fantastic install, those salespeople are mining for referrals, right? What if they become relationship sellers? That is then an efficiency feeding on an efficiency, and it's a different way to deploy your sales team, and it's using AI to create efficiencies at the very top of the funnel, and then changing the shape of the funnel by mining referrals. So again, if I was going to launch my own solar business right now, that's how I'd be doing it.
Patrick, I want to address a couple more things before we close. One is this overarching sort of, I try to think of like, what are the things that folks are thinking about when they're listening to this? And one of them is, well, if they know anything about Open Solar, your product is inherently free to the user, unlike some of let's argue most of your competitors in the marketplace. So it's, you didn't say, well, one way you can reduce your overall costs is by using Open Solar, which is free. But the overarching question in the back of my mind is, well, explain to me the business model. How is it free? I mean, the only other thing I can equate it to is like, as we enter into an increasingly data-heavy world, like I get essentially a free LG or Roku TV because they're, using and selling my data. Can you talk to me about the way that Open Solar works as a business in an environment where you offer a product that has historically been at cost for free?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take the data thing head on if I may.
Sure.
We don't sell the pros data, and it's in the terms and conditions, and it's in the privacy policy, and we don't do that. So now I'll tackle the why and the how, if I may. And the why, I'll do the why first, real quick. Most of us a large percentage working at Open Solar worked at Sungevity. We have quite a little crew.
Yeah.
And we know what it's like to be an installer, and we know that margins are tight. And we think that there are deeper pocketed players who can fund great software, so you don't have to charge the installer. And those players are fantastic partnerships that we've got with all the manufacturers, 150 plus manufacturers around the world, the finance providers in different parts of the world. And so the model is that, we ask our solar pros to use things like finance and buying hardware from us and things like that. We don't force them to. We ask.
Right.
Many of those solar pros are happy to do so because they know that it helps us. And by originating a finance deal or originating a hardware purchase in the shop, we get paid. So that is how we do it, so that we don't have to burden the installer with those software costs.
I think it's brilliant, honestly. Like, having studied origination, online marketing, affiliate marketing for the last 15 years, I think that Open Solar is probably, I should note, there's no fiscal relationship with Open Solar and SunCast. This isn't a promotion. It's not a paid episode by Patrick. I believe in the model that you've built because having watched kind of how the information age can help us accelerate, just like we started out using these tools that we already know work, Open Solar is one of the great examples of how to create an origination platform that truly adds value. It's a tool that anyone can use. Go back to past guests we've had, Scott Muller and Clayton Cornell from Solar Lead Factory, right? They started their business recognizing that leads were the single biggest pinch point, choke point of helping installers grow. And the first product they released was a widget, not unlike what your customer is asking for in Denver, that allowed homeowners to simply size a system. And of course, it was using some early sort of PV watts level math, but it was a simple widget that any installer could install on their website, right? So to go from like 2006 era, Sungevity, Solar Lead Factory widgets to a tool where now an installer can install this software onto their website and take a customer through the customer journey and have a team in the back end that processes the results of that customer's decision-making process rather than influencing them at the kitchen table, allows for a level of scale that we've only really seen through, Amazon level retail integration. So I'm encouraged to see this level of tech enablement to help do the one thing that we all agree is necessary: drive the cost down as much as possible, so that it is incontrovertible evidence that a distributed generation solar array plus batteries at every home in America is the inevitable future, and that it makes sense financially. And that as a result, like you mentioned at the top, it becomes a social product because every neighbor sort of looks around and goes, well, why don't you have solar yet? Right? The way that we all sort of think about it already.
Yeah. And Nico, that's the wind at our backs here, right? Because the more it's not linear, right? Think about Australia. Australia over the past 10 years went from 7% penetration to 33% penetration. So the wind at our backs in America is coming. Because as Bertie said on last week's event, 3.0 launch, we're entering an era in many parts of the world where solar's bought, not sold. So that really hard, involved process of trying to convince the customer, they're convinced. There's 5 houses in the street that have got it. So you take that wind at your back, and then you apply all the tools we talked about. And I think we've got a positive future ahead of us in the States.
One last thought. How do you think about educating the industry and the homeowners on these topics in a way that feels additive to the industry rather than, some folks think that like the process of education as marketing is extractive because it's education for the purpose of driving, users. Is there, you guys have a lot of experience with helping train homeowners and installers on how to do things differently. What might you add here as we wrap the conversation around how we as an industry need to think about the role of education in driving awareness in a way that doesn't talk about dollars per watt, doesn't talk about gigawatts deployed or even carbon greenhouse gas reduction?
I think that other big brands are going to play a huge role in education because one of the ways that you take it mainstream, and we did learn this in the early days with Sungevity had this amazing relationship with Lowe's Home Improvement, but one of the ways you make it feel like a mainstream product, like buying a washing machine or buying a new air conditioner, is you have other brands sort of educating in store, online, so that you have the end customers have got more of a stereo experience going on, where they're saying, I guess it is a mainstream thing these days. And I saw it in Lowe's. I learned about it on the EV manufacturer's website when I bought my EV. And I think that the other brands getting involved in this and helping the consumer understand this is a lifestyle product. This is a way this is an alternative way to power your existence, to get from A to B, to heat and cool your home. That is increasingly popular and everywhere. So I want to do, I want to do more as Open Solar with, lots more big brands and do that kind of stereo approach to education. Because I think that's the reassurance the consumer needs. What the consumer doesn't want is the hard sell. And I think I think what they do want is encouragement and a reassurance that it's a mainstream, wide, very popular product, easily done, design it for yourself and so on. I think that's our imminent future.
I think that I think it'd be fun to talk at length about the various messaging points. But I come from a very conservative WASP background, you might say. My father is very much still like a gun-toting, deer-hunting Republican. And when he thinks about having solar on his sort of gentleman's farm, he still sees it as like a alternative option that complements, his propane tank and his fuel tank and his gas generator. And that's the mindset that we have to shift in positioning this as a reliable resource. And I love the way you stated that as larger brands get involved and help customers realize that this is a lifestyle product that actually is already functional for millions of people in America and tens of millions of people around the world, we'll see mainstream acceptance of both the solar and storage value proposition for homeowners. Patrick, I am encouraged to see the success of Open Solar and the reality that Open Solar has now been around for, I guess it's about a decade or so now.
7 years. We've been 7.
Yeah, almost. Yeah, so 7 years proves that as an origination platform, it's working. You can offer an upfront product that's quite complex and requires a lot of investment for free because you've built a better mousetrap in terms of how to capture homeowner attention and how to capture installer throughput and volume in a way that is additive, not extractive. As we drive towards, first $250 for solar and storage all in, and then $2 a watt in America, I encourage folks to really question the way we've been doing business, not only from a business model of like, do I need to go knock on doors, but from a tools I use perspective. How can I integrate SolarAPP? How can I consolidate the complex software stack? Patrick and OpenSolar are doing a great job of showing, sort of leading the way on that. They're by no means the only game in town, but they're certainly doing things right. And that is what makes them the global leader for solar design software in the world. As we say goodbye, how can folks learn more about the latest 3.0 release and the ways that OpenSolar can help them drive their overall customer adoption up and customer acquisition costs down?
Yeah, well, we've got all the changes reflected on opensolar.com. So I think that there's a link up there right now, actually, where people can go to learn about everything that got launched last week. We have a team called ProX, which stands for Pro Experience, ready to help on board or get on board with the new features. And we're really open. We want some feedback, OpenSolar, right? But we want some feedback on what we've launched. We want to see how people feel about the AI. Is it helping? Is it achieving the effects we've talked about today? And we're very open to feedback, and we'll act on it.
Fantastic. Patrick Crane is the global head of growth for OpenSolar, and now a solar pioneer and OG in the industry, having helped chart the path for Sungevity and the many companies that followed in the wake over the last now almost 15 years. Patrick, thank you for all that you guys are doing to help us drive solar adoption and drive down the costs. Look forward to seeing how it goes for us.
Thanks, man. Really appreciate the time.